With Chapter 5 coming out in February, I've seen a lot of discussion about a possible Chapter 6. And right out the gate, I think I need to say no and words like stop. This is a really bad idea, and I'll tell you why I think so. First, let's recap some of the story. We return to the toy factory after receiving a letter telling us that the staff are still alive. By the end of Chapter 1, we listen to the first tape which builds the mystery around the monster known as the prototype. In Chapter 3, Poppy tells us that this monster lives in the labs deep below the factory and keeps surviving orphans who were once experimented on by the company. The goal through each chapter has been to reach the prototype and learn the truth about what he did and save the children. Personally, I think those kids are dead. The trailer definitely showed the prototype experimenting on toys, which, as we know, were once humans. With each chapter, the anticipation for this monster has been building and building. This is the monster set up in Chapter 1, and if Chapter 5 is where we confront him, then it makes zero sense to continue the story past this. Huggy's return also points to this. Huggy is the mascot of the game that got everything started, so if he's returning, then for me, that makes it pretty conclusive that this is the final chapter. But just because it's the end of the story doesn't mean we won't get spin-offs, and I find it hard to imagine Mob Games not capitalising on their franchise in this way. Mascot horror is a genre that loves sequel after sequel, spin-off after spin-off. The focus on lore means that these games rarely finish cleanly. There's always loose ends that can be spun into new tales, so I doubt it's the end for this universe. And for those wondering how they might continue if it ends with the factory being destroyed, well, that's pretty easy. Just go back in time. Maybe we could even get a game that goes back to the events like the Hour of Joy. We could even play as a toy instead of a human. There's lots of possibilities. But while I don't mind spin-offs, the main story should conclude. I've seen fans say that not all the smaller story details can be wrapped up in one chapter, meaning that there must be a Chapter 6. And I'm sorry to say, but I just don't see this happening. We don't know how long Chapter 5 will be, but if it's similar to the others, then the main story will definitely finish. This means finding and defeating the prototype. Any lore tidbits are secondary to that, just as they would be in any good story. I think fans can get a bit wrapped up in lore and forget that lore isn't what makes a good story. And if the developers are focused on finishing this narrative and in a satisfying way, then it needs to end here. Not every piece of lore needs to be answered. It's the big important questions that we need. Like, why is the prototype acting how it is? And against Poppy? If she's his daughter, why is he doing any of this? These are questions that are fundamental to the game because they relate to the larger conflict and the main characters. I'm sure Mob Games is aware of how important lore is to some people. I have confidence that most lore will be answered. It's not hard to throw in environmental details or a couple of VHS tapes to answer all the demands of players who are into that. For me, I just want a good story. To me, lore is just a thing that gets you hyped to play the game. It doesn't mean everything needs to be answered. And any loose ends can easily lead to spin-offs. But the main story should be self-contained and complete. And luckily, it seems as if the devs are doing just that. The consensus seems to be that this is the final chapter. I was a little worried seeing this new character, Lily Lovebraids. She seems to be another side enemy, but with both Huggy and the prototype in this chapter, it makes me wonder how the pacing will be. An issue I had with Chapter 4 was too many characters. There wasn't enough time to flesh them out. And some, like the Doctor, had really unsatisfying endings. Every major villain comes with their own story potential, especially ones that talk, it seems, like Mummy Longlegs or the Doctor. Lily follows this trend, and given that she seems to be interacting with Poppy in the trailer, it leads me to think she'll have an important part to play in the story. This could be an issue as the prototype's own story might get overshadowed by all these other characters. If we defeat him, and then it's like, hey, here's these other toys, they're even worse than the big bad, well, it only serves to draw things out and weaken the ending. It's also an issue of escalation. I think the creators even realise this. Poppy Playtime has taken us from Toy Factory to Game Station to Underground Orphanage and now to the labs. At some point, the stakes really can't go much higher. The story can't keep digging down forever, and this is why the prototype has to be where things end. The story's climax has been building around his character, and so to continue past him will cheapen the experience. If we get to the end of Chapter 5 and they reveal an even deeper cave system of toys or something, I'm going to lose it. Good stories have rises and peaks in tension, and the main rising tension should be where the conflict comes to a head. Anything else is just drawing things out for the sake of lore or for extra filler. And make no mistake, as much as I love some of these character designs, they are essentially filler. At least to the story. They create longer sections of the game in between the story beats. And that's fine, but to make a good story, you need to be aware of pacing. I think as mob games has expanded and the Poppy games have gotten more popular, they've tried to add more and more in each chapter. It's pretty admirable what an indie company can come up with in such a short time between chapters. As we know, this has led to some issues and a sense of things being rushed. But with chapter 5, I do feel like this is the one they can get right, because everything has been leading to this. Because it's been planned from the very start. The story of Poppy Playtime is coming to an end, but that doesn't mean it's the ending of the franchise. Not necessarily. But what do you think? Are you hoping for a chapter 6? I really do understand how people feel. This game has been around now for 4 years, which, given how much content we've gotten, it feels like it's been around a lot longer. I don't want to see the franchise disappear, but I do want a satisfying conclusion. That's it for now. See you in the next one.